In order to understand our first reading today about gazing with unveiled face, you have to go back to Exodus chapter 34. It is about the transfiguration of Moses. By the way, if you are wondering why Moses is often portrayed in religious art as having two horns, hindi ibig sabihing demonyo siya. It is also because of Exodus chapter 34. And let that be your assignment for today. Please, read Exodus 34. And there, in Exodus 34, we are told that Moses spent 40 days and 40 nights on the mountain, in Mount Sinai, in the presence of the Lord, as commanded by Yahweh. And he wrote the words of the covenant on stone tablets. At pagbaba daw niya mula sa bundok, napansin ng mga Israelite people, aba, kumikinang ang mukha ni Moises. The skin of his face was glowing. It had become radiant from having gazed too long at the glory of the Lord. Because of this, they were afraid to approach him. Anong ginawa ni Moises? Whenever he came down, he covered his face or his head with a veil in order to cover the radiance that was emanating from his face. He removed the veil only when he entered again into the presence of the Lord to gaze at the Lord, to speak with the Lord. Pero pagbaba niya, he would put back the veil. And that was whenever he spoke to the Israelites, because they could not endure now the Lord's glory that was being reflected on the face of Moses. You know, the Hebrew word, which is translated as radiant or shining forth, the word in Hebrew is karan. And it happens to be spelled exactly like the word for sungay, Keren. And this explains why Moses is artistically portrayed, sometimes with horns, and sometimes with rays of lights. I come from Betis, and in my hometown in Betis, Pampanga, the traditional craft of making silver-plated rays of light mounted on the head of the crucified Christ is still very much alive. We call it pukpok, pinupukpok, yung silver plating, and then it is made to appear like two silver rays. And it is funny, nung bata pa ako, akala ko din sungay. I really thought they were horns. I did not know that the confusion goes back already to the Bible. St. Paul says in our first reading, all of us, gazing with unveiled face on the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory. This makes me understand the line in Psalm 80 that says, O Lord, make us turn to you. Let us see your face, and we shall be saved. St. Paul also speaks about the reverse situation, about people whose minds are veiled and blinded making them unable to see the light of the gospel, of the glory of God. You know, I have a feeling that St. Paul here is being sarcastic about the Pharisees who had this strange practice of covering their faces whenever they prayed in the synagogue and read the Torah. Jesus is insinuating that these supposedly learned men were actually unable to truly understand the law and the prophets, despite all their repeated readings and repeated recitations of biblical passages. In today's gospel, Jesus begins precisely with the supposed righteousness of these religious leaders who always walked around with elaborate prayer shawls. I am sure you see those in movies. Yung mga Jewish rabbi na pag nagdadasal, nakatakip yung ulo nila, prayer shawls, headgears, with which they have to cover their heads and their faces when they read the Torah. Jesus challenges his disciples to strive for righteousness that surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees. He was aware that many of these people who looked so pious, they looked so holy, they frequented worship services, these very people followed him around. They followed Jesus not because they wanted to listen to him or to learn from him, but because they wanted to use his words against him. Many of these Pharisees had become so angered by Jesus' down-to-earth way of interpreting the law, they just would not listen to him anymore. Ang mga puso nila ay parang natatakpan. Their hearts were veiled with bias against him. They just wanted him dead. And yet, he says, in the middle of it all, they continued to offer their gifts to the altar. They kept coming to the temple. They kept praying in the synagogues, repeatedly, reading the law of Moses, but they were unable to make any sense of it. Why? Well, because they could not behold the face of God. One of the most unique and meaningful things about the way we Filipinos celebrate Easter is the traditional ritual we call salubong, di ba? Encuentro. And the main event in the ritual is when the angel of the Lord comes down. At wala siyang ibang trabaho kundi to remove the veil that covers the face of Mama Mary so that she can behold the glorious face of the resurrected Christ. The angel facilitates the glorious encounter. Today, our readings challenge us to dare to see God's face by allowing his angels to remove the veils that darken our lives, to remove the veils that cover our faces and our hearts. They can be the veils of anger and resentment, or the veils of pride and prejudice, or of arrogance and conceit, of envy and jealousy. Talagang kapag natatakpan ang puso ng tao ng ganito, wala siyang makita. Today, I suggest that our prayer be, Lord, let us turn to you. Let us see your face, and we shall be saved.